Anyone traveling through downtown Hot Springs inevitably notices the giant old Army-Navy hospital towering over the city.
For close to a century, this building has been the center of the Spa City, but now it's sitting vacant, deteriorating day after day.
It would be like having the Empire State Building be empty and vandalized.
I have always believed that architecture is the spark that gives a town its soul. It is the unique mark that differentiates each city from another. I have always been drawn to Hot Springs. I love the immaculate architecture, the rich colors that can be seen throughout the town's various seasons, and the vast history that teaches me something new every time I come into town.
Architecturally, this is one of the most important icons in Hot Springs right now, outside of the Arlington Hotel.
One of which is the Army-Navy Hospital. It is one of the most expansive places I have ever explored since the Majestic Hotel, also in Hot Springs. It has over 20 buildings on its campus, and my friend Brent came down from Canada, and we had the awesome opportunity to explore the entire place early last year in 2022. Everything from the 1930s retro bowling alley, the living quarters, the old hospital rooms, and a lot of other structures that had not been stepped foot in for many years. When I first learned of the hospital back in 2011, the central building was still open. However, many of the buildings in the back were still abandoned. Something drew me to it and left me wanting to know more. In 2019, the Arkansas Career Training Institute, that had taken over the massive structure along with a few of the facilities, shut down, and now the entire campus is sitting alone, abandoned, leaving many locals concerned.
You know, electrical infrastructure is about 100 years old. Getting close to 100 years old. I mean, 1933, 1932 is when it was being built. Any type of infrastructure like that's that old can be problematic. This is a building that has an incredible presence, located on that precipice above Central Avenue, looking down on Central Avenue. And you look at the shape of it. The shape of it speaks of power. It speaks of longevity. When you look at the building, those are the things that are inspired inside you, at least in me. And so, you know, there are just some things about it that are certainly worthy of the government's consideration to make it into a useful thing again.
Samuel Fordyce was in the Union Army but fought in Tennessee, and he had an incident there where he met a General John Logan. So Logan was now a senator from Illinois, and unbeknownst to anybody else, he comes to Hot Springs to visit for his bath. He wanted to take the bath, and he stayed here. And of course, Mr. Fordyce had an interest in a hotel and some other stuff, and so he had been with a group of these men, both North and South veterans. They thought they needed something here in Hot Springs for the military.
This right here, ladies and gentlemen, was the sunroom, and whatever building this was used for. You have these really tall ceilings, the ceiling fans that would run. I actually wouldn't be surprised if this used to all be open, if maybe these windows were added on later. But a lot of this whole town was founded on the principle of healing diseases that were uncurable at the time. So sunlight was a big cure, along with the bathhouses, along with the bathing and the being out in the fresh air in the open. Sunbathing and being out in the sun and fresh air was such a big thing. And so you have these big open rooms with the ceiling fans.
That's an old fan.
This is a really, really cool room, because this right here, I think, showcases exactly what Hot Springs was all about. And now it's used for storage.
The Army and Navy General Hospital opened its doors to her first patients on January 17, 1887. The original front structure was designed by John L. Smithmeyer, Superintendent of Southern Architecture, and constructed under the supervision of J.W. Jacobs. For years, the hospital served as a beacon and healing grounds for the wounded soldiers. In 1930, the House Military Committee approved a bill authorizing the construction of a new building on the campus and demolishing of the unneeded old structures. The new and improved hospital had hundreds of beds and was 7 stories high with 2 separate wings. This massive structure, the likes of which Hot Springs had never seen, was completed in 1933, and just in time, because not long after it was completed, the earth-shattering nightmare, World War II, began. The hospital saw a surge in patients And in 1946, the neighboring Eastman Hotel was purchased to become living quarters for the personnel.
I'm going to check it out. I think I remember. The Eastman Hotel was built in 1890 by several investors who wanted a grand hotel, and they got one. It had a 1,000-person capacity for a while. It was the largest hotel in the country. It had a grand ballroom. It had orchestras giving concerts 3 times a day, and there was dancing every night.
In addition, the Arlington and the Majestic hotels also housed the overflow of soldiers who could not be accommodated on the hospital campus.
You can see a little difference between the Arlington, the Eastman, and the Park in the early days and the Majestic when it was first built by comparing their prices. It was $8 a day at the other 3, and it was $3 a day at the Majestic.
Shockingly, just a few years later in 1949, a report was released by the armed forces that would cease operations at the Army-Navy Hospital, and on July 1st, 1955, the hospital was closed in an economic move.
They persuaded Truman not to close it, extended its life a little bit, but it was just the military had other facilities, and this was kind of a remote place, I would imagine. In 1959, though, they gave it to the state. The state made a proposal, said we'd like to use it for rehabilitation purposes, residential facility, and they had all kinds of training programs, things that people could do, learn a skill, and make a living.
The HSRC, which was later renamed to the Arkansas Career Training Institute, was a residential rehabilitation facility for people with disabilities that was run by the state and was used by multiple states in the Midwest. So when this was the Arkansas Career Training Institute, this was the collision center, so locals could actually come here and get their cars detailed and serviced at a discounted rate because there were people with mental disabilities that would be learning how to operate and establish a career here. And so
we all worked as a team, from the doctors to the janitors, on down. And our goal was to help the student. One of the neatest things about ACTI was, though, that all the students could relate to each other because they were all in the same boat. Had a particular student, she was a young lady, studied cosmetology. Her hope was that she would eventually have her own business. Got a building, or rented a building, and put in her own beauty salon. She's successfully employed, and she's hiring students that have disabilities themselves. Another one, she was remarkable. She could read lips like nobody else. She went through our culinary arts program. She went from us over to Pulaski Tech. And Pulaski Tech has got one of the best culinary arts programs, probably in the state, and not in the country. So she's having the time of her life over there, and hopefully when she graduates, she'll be able to open up her bakery and do what she wants. If that place was open today, I'd be working.
Why?
Because ACTI was family. The staff members that I've known and the students that I've known, they were top-notch people. They cared. They worked as a team. We keep in contact with one another. We cry real tears when one of our people passes away, and I've had a lot of that lately. Lost one of my best friends up there due to COVID and things like that. So I would go back there in a minute and work and help out again. It was something I really enjoyed doing. I didn't consider it a job. I just enjoyed doing it.
Unfortunately, after an incredibly long and successful run, the building was officially closed in 2019 and has since sat abandoned, like many other historic buildings in the area.
Go to the building.
There's an old 70s kitchen.
I mean, the range of, this whole campus is just parts that are like really historical and others are like, ugh.
The program were getting more and more expensive. There were more and more things that needed to be done to building one. One of the things that they did, and they got completed just before they closed, thank God, was we noticed that the stained glass, as you're coming up the main entryway into the main building, and you're kind of in the middle there, and there's all these office doors beside you. The administrator's office is over here, the assistant administrator's office, and you look up and there's some pretty glass. Well, that skylight was beginning to fall, and very, very expensive to have repaired. Well, they finally got repaired, but there were things like electrical wiring that needed to be done, and that was going to cost a mint for a building that's 198,000 square feet. And maybe we just weren't getting enough bang for our buck in the later years. People change a lot. One of the things we were having trouble with at that time was getting kids that really wanted to go to work. Unless you got that for that kind of a program, you can't accomplish much. And of course, it's part of our job to try to instill that. But you know the old adage, you can't make a horse drink water. The horse is gonna want to, and you gotta want to go to work. So I think all those factors, and then more government rules and regulations sent to the state of Arkansas at the time, or at least this administration that we currently have now, to the director that it was time to close and try something different. Sadly, I don't think they realized. They were thinking at the time that if they could get these kids help locally at places where they lived, then it would be a much better program. One of the probably saddest issues up there is the old bowling alley.
Bowling alley. Michael says there's bowling balls left behind, shoes.
Yeah.
The lanes here.
The old ball returns are still here. Check this out.
Oh, wow. This is something else. There's all the seats here still.
Oh, yeah. Bowling ball right here.
Oh.
The old bowling alley we used quite often for the students. It was all wooden balls, all wooden pins. You had to set your own pins, but they would actually bowl. And I wish we could have saved that, because you don't see any bowling alleys like that anymore.
Since the doors were shut, a group has been working to make sure that the Army and Navy Hospital is preserved and doesn't end up like the other buildings that have been lost in the past. One particular person who was passionate about saving the building was Clay Farrar. Sadly, he passed away last year in 2022 without getting to see the building saved.
When you have significant pieces of architecture, like the Rehabilitation Center and some of these other buildings in town, we've got to really think twice about that historic architectural history. Once you close a building, you turn the power off, you turn the heat and air off, everything starts deteriorating, there's no airflow through it, water gets in, you get a leak in the roof, a pipe busts, water goes everywhere, there goes the floors, and it gets to a point where someone doesn't want to rehab it because it's too difficult, too much to do.
papers and stuff. Let's do a date. Can you see a date on that?
Look at all the old chairs in here. Like this yellow one. That's so nice. Shower building. Your shower room. A big window.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever something this big isn't taken care of or looked after, it's hard to think that anything can be done, and hope seems to be a distant, unattainable dream. The problem isn't that there's no one interested in buying and restoring it, but it's the battle being played out by the state and federal levels. There are many people interested in buying it and restoring it.
There's not too many buildings out there like this from that time period maybe still standing, and if there are, they should be saved.
But it's just not so simple as handing it over to them.
My fear is, though, that it's going to get lost in the federal bureaucracy. And, that swamp is deep.
A lot of people are interested in restoring that place, and some people, specifically want to know what they can do to get a lease on that place, to purchase that place, or it's just like the general public wants to see it restored also. But whatever the case, the first thing that's got to happen is the ownership of that property has to be figured out. And right now, Preserve Arkansas and other groups locally in Hot Springs are trying to help facilitate the process of this happening. And it's an issue where the federal government and the state of Arkansas were kind of doing this tug of war and dance, maybe is a better way to put it, over who was going to end up with the property once the state decided that they no longer wanted to use it as the Arkansas Rehabilitation Services facility. So right now it's still kind of in limbo, but hopefully that'll be figured out sooner than later. And then once it moves into federal ownership, it can be disposed of as surplus property. And at that point, it could become available to a private developer. And the Army-Navy Hospital, you have this huge main hospital building, but then you also have acres with other buildings on it to deal with. And you have the issue with it being the land it sits on is part of the national park and part of the recharge area for the springs. And so it's very sensitive and delicate, and it's protected as being part of the national park. There are stipulations and rules that must be followed if you were to be the one to next occupy that site, as far as ground disturbance, things that you cannot do up there. But if something were to happen with the Army-Navy Hospital or any of the properties back behind the main hospital building, such as a fire, that could be very bad for the springs.
When the hospital first closed, there was some security posted around the building to keep an eye on it. However, the state stopped paying for it, and suddenly trespassers were flocking to the historic building daily.
Right, new this morning, vandals are making their way into hot spring landmarks, causing a lot of damage to some historic property.
Currently, there's no security covering this 20-acre campus, and people have been taking advantage of that. Take a look at some of the pictures we got from an anonymous source. You can see doors have been kicked in, windows broken, and trash left out.
Things started getting worse and worse for the once magnificent and towering campus. As of May 2022, the state has paid to put security back. But that doesn't mean something bad can't still happen.
Is it true that there are some dangerous chemicals in those back buildings that could seep into the hot springs, or is that just a fact?
No, that's actually true. Probably those chemicals probably date back to the time that the Army-Navy Hospital had it too. Yeah, there's been a phase 1 environmental study done on it. I think there's been a phase 2 as well. And so those are all precursors to actually doing something to remediate the problem. Right now, I think the state and the military are kind of at a standoff saying, you're gonna do it. And the military is saying, well, no, we're not. We're not gonna accept it back till you take care of this. There are just several different areas where there are different hazardous materials, and among those is asbestos. I mean, you would expect asbestos to be in those buildings as old as they are, and they're there. So that is part of the problem associated with it. But there are some chemicals that have been dumped out at different places and things like that. Mainly chemicals associated with the medical professions over the years. The water from the hot springs come from so deep in the earth. It's probably not going to affect them. It would be more likely to affect runoff water, like drainage water that would come off the site. And I would think that would probably be the primary threat. And in hot springs, that is contained. It's going into the lake at some point in time. The plywood buildings that were built in the World War II era, there is an effort that is going to take those down, simply because of the fact that if one of those buildings caught on fire on the side of that hill in dry, windy conditions, the fire would roll right up the hill. There's absolutely nothing we could do to stop it, because those buildings are located below the tree line, right at the tree line, and so you're going to superheat everything above it. If you do that, that fire is going to spread. There's not going to be a lot we're going to be able to do, especially in a high wind situation.
The sentiment that many abandoned buildings fall victim to is one of obsolescence, and the towering Army-Navy hospital is but another misunderstanding. Like so many buildings across Arkansas and the United States, the value of these structures is taken for granted, which puts the future of these buildings and their communities at great risk. It reminds me of a quote from the urban theorist Jane Jacobs, who in 1961 wrote, "Cities need buildings so badly, for it is impossible for vigorous streets and districts to grow without them. Old ideas can sometimes use new buildings. New ideas must use old buildings." The efforts of our past are daily dismissed. Yet our ignorance of its importance damages and might be the death of once great American cities. Imagining a future for Hot Springs, one where every building is occupied, in use, and alive, is the hope that Hot Springs and many American cities need in order to manifest prosperity, not only for us, but for the future generations of people who live there. Let us make a future that we can all enjoy, and a place for our children to grow and prosper. So what can be done to save the Army and Navy Hospital? As of right now, the only thing that we can do is contact our state representatives and make sure that our voices are being heard. Although the government moves slow, the more they are reminded of the issue, the more likely it is that they will do something about it. The fight to save the Army and Navy Hospital has only just begun, and unfortunately, it will not be an easy fight. Because last year, I came out with a documentary about the Majestic Hotel just down the street, the same hotel that was housing soldiers from the hospital during World War II. And this film has similar undertones to the fight that will be necessary to save the Army and Navy Hospital. If you'd like to watch this film, it can be found on Amazon Prime and many other streaming services.
What is it that makes your city worth living in? It's your city's history. It's the soul. It's the culture.
My name is Michael Schwartz. My friends and I love exploring and documenting abandoned buildings to tell their stories, and the Majestic Hotel in Hot Springs, Arkansas was something that fascinated us from the moment we walked in.
Majestic was one of the great hotels in the South. It was this huge, sprawling complex full of restaurants, drugstores, a bathhouse.
When this place captured my soul, I wanted to help somehow, and that's when I met Brenda.
Maybe there's a way I can form a movement to actually restore that hotel and save it.
Historic Majestic Hotel is in some seriously bad shape.
Shouldn't have been allowed to get that way. That's called demolition by neglect.
If you allow a roof to be compromised, you're sentencing that building to death.
This place is burning to the ground,
turning this beacon into a den of ashes.
The red brick was spared from this fire.
After the fire, people from all across the state wanted to make sure Hot Springs history would be protected.
What you have there is a building that needs a champion.
It was pretty obvious the fire did not start internal to the building, and that seems really strange.
The city's plan is to wipe this out.
We need to polish it. We need to bring it back.
All of the department heads had been banking on getting that property and demolishing it.
I want to see it gone.
This city has been mafia for years, and if you're not in that loop, you're not welcome.
I will not prohibit them from having a voice.
Well, some of us want to watch NCIS.
I'm consumed by the history that is in this city.
Could the Majestic Hotel be saved? Thank you so much to John Cooksey at the Hot Springs Broadcast Network and Brent at Abandoned Urbex Canada for the additional footage in this documentary. Just because the Army and Navy Hospital is abandoned doesn't mean it's the end of the story.